20s, that's where you would expect a 2800 player to be. That means, on average, per move, he'll lose 0.2 compared to the top computer suggestions, but that's still very good. That's very accurate. And Eric, meanwhile, still good, 43, but not in the same accuracy level as Magnus. OK, the game has started. It's an Italian opening, but we will talk about some of these stats as we go along, especially endgames. Magnus better there.
87! How incredible is that number?
I mean, that's just
meaning he wins 80% of the games that goes into the endgame. That's crazy.
Or at least his accuracy. Yeah, I mean, he's clearly one of the best endgame players of all time. He's got... endgames is a really interesting area of chess, which I'm definitely not feeling most comfortable in. But a lot of it is just to do with piece placement, intuition, good calculation, and Magnus has got all of those, of course.
And, well, is it about in this game, then, for Eric to keep the queens on, never enter the endgame with Magnus?
It looks that way. I think that's just good advice for anyone in general. Lawrence, I'll get you my chessable course with Magnus to help with your games before that.
It's funny, I went out into the foyer and I saw it. It was being played on the big screen. But what a curious opening by Magnus to go for this. This is what I used to play when I was 12 years old. Yeah,
it's not the most popular opening necessarily, like you say, after kind of club level.
Yeah.
Especially at Grandmaster level, you very rarely see this nowadays. But, OK, it's level material. White the first to castle. Black has the bishop pair. Slightly fractured pawn structure.
Isn't this a specialty of Gawain Jones?
Yes.
English Grandmaster.
And what is the opening?
Scotch Gambit.
Yeah.
Aha, never heard of.
Yeah, so it's kind of a mix between the Italian game and the Scotch game, and you kind of throw them together, and you get this, which is a bit of a mess. And normally it gets really wild with both sides throwing pawns forward towards each other. There are some strategic aspects. Black's pawn structure not ideal, but yeah, the bishop pair has fantastic potential. It's normally got quite a good reputation for Black, this opening, at least historically. And it's known as a bit of a tricky one for White.
Yeah, and just checking the database, I can just see that the highest rated player who's played this with the white pieces is Magnus Carlsen himself against Liam Le. Otherwise, it's otherwise it's just a row, or just a whole line of Gawain Jones's games.
Yeah,
he's done quite well with it, I have to say. Yeah, impressive stats.
That's the thing. If you know an opening really well, even if objectively it's maybe not the best opening, then you'll get good results if you know it better than your opponent. And this one, yeah, it's out of fashion, and maybe that's just a good, kind of a good piece of advice to follow. If an opening's out of fashion, you can reinvent it, you can pick it up. Your opponent might not be familiar with what to do.
Okay. Well, is this a sign Magnus is experimenting, maybe working on openings right now? Maybe is in training mode been in and working on some new stuff?
Yeah, I mean, Magnus, he's a busy man, but he's always working on chess. He's always studying, always kind of craving these new ideas, or at least old, forgotten ideas, where he does kind of pick them up and add his own touch. I mean, this bishop move, very popular. I'm surprised to see Magnus pause.
It's an interesting, because believe it or not, I've played this a lot myself as well. Yeah. In fact, I had a game in this line against one of the participants of this event.
Oh, who was that?
Shakhriyar Mamedjarov.
Ah!
And you had White?
I had White, and it was the World Under-14 Championships, or Under-16 Championships.
Nice!
So before you were born, Kaya.
A nice memory.
It wasn't a nice memory, actually, because I had a great position, and he was already 2,500. I was only like 2,250 at the time. And I had a fantastic position, and I blew it. So the memory wasn't that nice, because it was like, oh, I'm beating Mamedjarov, or I'm better. Yeah, and here he was deciding whether to push f3 and kick the knight immediately, or play bishop e3. And there are some small nuances. For example, in this position here, if I remember them correctly, the move Queen e7 now exists. And now if you kick the knight with f3, you've got this surprising move, knight to d6, because the bishop on e3 is hanging. However, Eric goes the standard way with bishop b6, and now I expect Magnus to kick with f3. He'll move the knight to g5, and then he'll probably kick the knight again with f4, gaining some time. And yeah, I had this position a lot in my life.
Came in, challenged the knight.
Challenged the knight, and then it's
come to this square as well, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's all about like whether, you know, it's all about restraining pawns in a way. You know, black will try to advance the double pawns that they have on the C line, and white will try to control those pawns. And on the flip side, white will actually try to push their pawns and try to use the F pawn as a bulldozer, just open lines against the black king. So, intriguing race.
Yeah. Very rich position, dynamically, strategically. It's just really, really hard to handle for both sides. And for me, it's a bit worrying to see that Eric is pausing at this moment. It's something that, for sure, he studied at some point, maybe when he was 12 years old, as you mentioned there, Lawrence. But if the world champion's playing this against you and it's so direct, it's so imbalanced, you really need to know what you're doing. So, OK, white, we mentioned, could push forward. I'm not sure you need to rush. I think there's a few other moves in this position. I vaguely remember this one being a move as well, just pushing the queen forward. But yeah, it's been years since I studied this one too. It's hard to retrieve all those memories.
As Jovanka said, Gawain still played this very much when he was over 2600 with some good results, did some work on this. But as far as I understand, if you really, really, really know what you're doing here with black, you can get a really good position because the two bishops come alive at some point and they can terrorize. So I'm very curious to see. If Magnus does play something new here, I'm very curious because it does mean that he might have done some work. It doesn't look like it, though, by his body language. Feels as though he's kind of just going move by move here almost.
Yeah, it's strange that both players are thinking because, OK, it's a rare line or an older line that we mentioned, but, OK, pushing a pawn forward now. But it's the type of line where you need to kind of know what you're doing. Long-term, black is doing very well with those bishops. Short-term, white, maybe the favourite. And, OK, the evaluation bar doesn't like Magnus's move. It feels like he's freestyling, actually, with this last one. Jovanka, has this been played before?
It has been played before. The latest one was Gavrilescu in 2022.
Strong Romanian player.
Yeah, and then Misa Pap in 2008 was also the next highest rated player. But you're right, David, it's not the most popular choice. And white is just simply saying, I want to restrain those pawns that black has on the C line. I want to control the advance. And then he's going to get on with his plan of pushing forward the F pawn. There it comes. I was beginning to question my life's existence if that pawn wasn't going to get pushed.
Yeah, so finally kicking away this knight. We expect the knight to plonk itself back into the centre. I guess. You could maybe make an argument for dropping back, but this would just invite white forward. So, yeah, the knight does indeed re-centralise, and now Magnus tries to trade off black's best piece. It's heating up. This game, I think, from its opening, is much more promising than the last game we followed.
Yeah.
Definitely feels entertaining, imbalanced, everything we could hope for.
Two players that, well, know each other quite well, recently played on the same team in the European Club Championship for the Norwegian team, Offersbill. And are they also good friends, these two? I kind of had the impression during the Oslo Esports Cup when Eric was in Oslo that these two, they had a good chemistry.
Yeah, I mean, Eric with his Norwegian-sounding name.
Yeah.
I guess he's got a
I mean,
great
my
connection.
uncle's name is Eric Hansen.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's like an Eric Hansen on every corner here in Norway. But he's got a Norwegian-sounding name, and I guess that strengthens his bond. I know he's very good friends with Arian Tari, and one of Magnus's kind of teammates in Norway as well. So.
But I wanted to say one thing about events such as the European Club Championships, because I just actually played in that myself, and it's a very unifying event. You know, you have dinner with your team, you analyse with your team, you have breakfast, you play the games alongside, and it just feels like you're part of a group of friends. I mean, it's so rare not to get on with your teammates.
And team events must be so much fun in chess.
Yeah, it is. It is a lot of fun, and it's somehow just a lot more relaxed than you would get in, say, in the Olympiad, where it just feels like it's high pressure and there's a lot of things at stake. The European Club Cup, I mean, it just felt like 5 friends in the case of the women.
That's nice.
Just hanging out.
Yeah.
And in the open section, you know, I did see the Offersbill. They were hanging out all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, they walked to the venue together. They also left the venue together, and I think they were sharing the same location as well.
Yeah.
Venue.
That's very nice. And actually, so the Czech team that won the open section, we have several players in this tournament that won the European Club Cup. Nils Grandelius was in that team.
David Anton.
And Vidit, was it?
Vidit was also there. He had a tremendous score, 6 out of 7. You know, 6 out of 6, and then he lost his final game. And then, of course, Hari Krishna, who also did very well on board 1.
Yeah.
So, yeah, fun friends.
Yeah, and being busy, the players in the Aimchess. Rapid, these two busy making moves. We have a couple more on the board.
Yeah, we have a couple more. White's knight has been kicked away from the centre. So as Jovanka was advocating, both sides pushing pawns, Black's c-pawn pushing, the white knight. I don't really like the square it's landed on, but maybe it was necessary. And Erik's dilemma is what to do with his own knight. Does he trade off? Does he try and maintain it there? It's not that easy to do so. Magnus, meanwhile, laughing to himself. Or he was at least a moment ago. Something we've seen, but back to the poker face. And what would you guys be thinking here? And Lawrence, I guess with your experience, albeit a while ago, what would you be?
So in general, as Black here, what you really want to do is you want to trade this knight off the board, because you can't really allow knight takes e4. Your pawns get shattered and your bishop on b6 could be locked out of the game forever. So what you tend to do is you take on d2, queen takes d2, and then the bishop normally comes to either c6 or b5. Let's put it on c6. Looking for greener pastures along the long diagonal. But what Erik is thinking about, I'm pretty sure, is what to do if Magnus just goes all in here with f5. And, you know, f6 is coming, and suddenly your king might be in some kind of mating net. Now, I'm not sure if this works. I'm not sure what the exact move is here for Black, but it looks scary optically. It looks... This is for sure why Erik is taking a moment. If you don't do that, then what are you supposed to do? Because if you trade knights, let's say knight takes d2, queen takes d2, you now have this d5 pawn hanging, and you can play a move like bishop f5, but that runs into knight g3. I don't like that, gaining tons of time. You can't put the bishop on e6. It runs into pawn to f5. So what are you actually supposed to do? Play a move like c6? But that's a very tough move to play. Because now, for example, White will go all positional and play b4, for example. It might be an interesting move. Try and get a grip over those dark squares, or a bind, as it's called in chess lingo. Suddenly, all of those squares in the middle, White can occupy with his pieces. And now Magnus would really be in his element. If these dark square bishops come off the board, knight versus bishop middle game, oof. That's what he would dream of this position. He'd sell that cabin in Sweden if he could get that position every game. And now we're going to see it. So let's see what Erik does here. He's going to take a pause. What do you think, David? Do you think he's going to play c6? I can't see it.
I agree with you. It's a really critical moment right now. The evaluation bar isn't bothered at all. That's probably because in one of these variations, for example, if the bishop moves, probably because this attack for White isn't actually as dangerous as it looks, but like you say, for a human. And that's the key point here. For a human in a rapid game where you don't have time to calculate, it looks so scary, to allow this pawn stepping forward. And he actually plays your move, your first instinct. So the bishop's potentially on a good diagonal if things open up, but this one is blocked in, and your king is kind of left to its own devices. Oof.
Jovanka, this is your sort of position now.
I know, I love
Would you go f5 here?
Of course.
Yeah?
Like, no doubt, 1,000%.
1,000%.
Yeah, look at that.
There we go.
There we go. And we have it on the board. You know, I mean, it's every person's dream, right? I mean, I don't care what the computer says. Computers could say, like, Black is winning, but I'd be very happy.
Yeah, I mean, just look at that king. It's got 0 defenders around it. It's got 2 pawns rushing towards it. The bishop is coming to this square, maybe even to sacrifice itself to open things up. The rook could potentially be coming at some point to swing over. Yeah, if we had Simon Williams sitting here still, he would be salivating. He would be drooling at the thought of this position. And Erik just has to do something urgently. I'm not sure what. Maybe you could block the advance of this pawn by pushing your own pawn forward, but you do weaken this square. Firstly, the pawn could just push and pass pawn there, or at some point later, the knight could start jumping in. If you don't push that pawn forward, what else do you do? I don't really see any sacrifices working. OK, he does play it. Maybe he needed to.
Ooh. Now things get very exciting because all kinds of things are in the air here now. For example,
if white takes this pawn or white leaves it, what are you thinking?
Well, my first instinct was to leave the pawn because I didn't want to trade and activate the dark square bishop that black has. But then again, it's tempting.
I do like the move, though.
Yeah.
I do like the move because...
If it works, it's what black needs to do, actually.
Eric is activating, that was why he put the bishop on c6 to open that long diagonal. And now, for example, just a sample line, if you play, for example, bishop g5 here, just moving away, you gain an important tempo because you can play queen to d5 and you're threatening mate all of a sudden. So I do like this move, and Magnus has decided to take.
Yeah.
And now actually taking back is not automatic whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, you could take back. What else would you be considering right now, Lawrence? I think this queen move, you would love to play it, but unfortunately, white can... actually, I'm not sure whether this way, maybe the other way.
The other way, yeah.
With the knight, you can hit the queen and you can defend this pawn at the same time. Not quite working for black there. So, OK, let's look at the obvious one at least. Yeah. Pawn takes pawn. Now, if you take with the bishop, now you're pinned on the d file and you're pinned on this diagonal, which isn't ideal. So I guess Magnus would want to recapture with the knight. He would be a pawn up temporarily. It's not just any pawn as well, it's one of these two. It's still tricky. The evaluation bar says complete zeros. Not impressed at all, but...
Feels like there might be a tactic here.
Yeah, feels very close to being something for black at least. White has overextended, potentially the king is not entirely safe.
The knight is pinned, David, because queen takes d2. So if can I play a simple move like queen d5 here?
Yeah, just to show your point, knight takes bishop, looks like it solves issues, but after queen takes queen, white can't recapture due to a pin on this diagonal. So yeah, maybe you're right, actually. Maybe that's the clever finesse. Again, it's not entirely clear what the threat is. Maybe...
Well, queen takes e5 might exist because e3 is hanging.
Yeah, maybe taking this pawn, maybe just swinging the rook, adding more pressure.
That's the real threat, just activating those rooks.
Yeah.
OK, he's going for it. I think we will see this position on the board, and if Eric puts his queen in centre, he has just done, as you mentioned there, as you suggest, Lawrence. Yeah,
he is not wired up to this commentary of that.
Okay. Listening in. He's just playing good moves, and logical moves as well.
Yeah.
It's cost him a lot of time. That's the one downfall for Eric. He's got a good position, healthy position, but 6 minutes.
But now is the time for white to regroup and start looking after the king. And I like Magnus's last move. I was also maybe considering moving the rook up one square as well, just to kind of overprotect the queen. But the pawn on e5 still can't be taken because...
maybe it can.
Can it be?
Oh.
Maybe it can. And it has been taken.
It has been taken, OK.
So the idea is that the bishop falls, but if the bishop falls, the black queen can take the white bishop, which was hanging, and we'd be in an endgame. Magnus loves those endgames, as we've seen, but the question is, in this position, is white's king good in the corner? No. The black bishop's pretty decent. White's knight also very good, but is it enough to win? Not easy. Not easy. And if Magnus doesn't go for this, if he doesn't go for the endgame, what's he doing? He risks being worse if he leaves the two black bishops on the board. He does take it. And we're going to head straight into this endgame. OK, well, now we can take a breath. And Eric won't lose on time. He's still got some work to do, though. It's especially this white knight, which controls two squares the black rooks want to use. Black wants to use this square. Black maybe wants to use this square, but both are covered by this knight. So this knight is a real thorn in his side. Yeah. Who do you prefer and why?
Tricky one. Very, very tricky one.
Yeah, it's...
I feel that... white is still better, despite all the exchanges that's happened. I mean, white will have access to the open lines, as you've highlighted. Also, there's that possibility of pushing the f pawn one square forward to f6 and just locking out the black king. Obviously, that's a double-edged sword. You know, it could be a very weak pawn you have there. But in the meantime, black has to play a few accurate moves, and it's not easy how he's going to activate the rooks.
Yeah, maybe we can pull up those Aimchess stats again, just to see the endgames. Magnus, what was it, 87% or something?
That was incredible.
Endgames that he'd won on the tour this season in rapid chess. Yeah, Eric, I've always thought of him as quite a good endgame player, or quite decent. And there we go, 87% for Magnus.
Wow.
61% for Eric, still good.
Yeah.
But, OK, it looks clear there's a favourite. And we don't need to look at the other stats necessarily for this game, but interesting that Eric keeps up in most of the other categories, actually. Advantage capitalization, both of them very good there. Decisiveness, Eric playing many decisive games. And resourcefulness, Eric pretty resourceful, even if things go wrong. 30% there, but okay, endgame, it's just about that one.
Yeah. And what I like about these stats is that it does give you a clear way to improve your chess. Like it tells you, you know, if Magnus is 87% and you're 67%, you know, if you want to be at the same level as Magnus, get your endgame stats to be better. So, I like it.
Is that something that chess players are working more and more on, the endgame?
Hard to say. I would say no, actually. So much emphasis on opening theory nowadays.
Because you can actually win games out of the opening,
right?
With all theory.
And you can guarantee you'll get certain positions in the opening. So endgames is kind of general. You'll never get the same endgame twice, or very rarely. But have you studied endgames, Lawrence? Is that something that has contributed to your success?
Not enough. No. Let's put it like that.
Endgames is the part we always want to study, or it's the part we pretend we study, but it's actually hard to knuckle down and say, OK, I'm going to look at rook endgames today.
Yeah. And it's an entirely different universe, actually. There are some players that just dedicate their lives to it. I mean, there are some grandmasters, Carsten Müller, for example, famous grandmaster out of Hamburg, an endgame freak, in a good sense, right? He just does endgames, endgames, endgames. It's tough. It's almost a different game somehow. But Magnus playing... I've been looking at this and I've been trying to work out what kind of setup I would play. And he puts the bishop on c5 and he wants to put the bishop on d6 and just use that bishop as a bit of a... if you can imagine a wine bottle cork. So when you've had a glass of wine, you put the cork back in. That's what that bishop would do on d6. It would...
See, this is a metaphor I can work with.
You can put... Well, you can put the... You can put those rubber corks back in.
Yeah.
That's how I view. But actually, Eric isn't quite in time to get the configuration he wants.
Now the cork, if you put it back in the bottle, then you drop this pawn.
Or does he? Or can you?
Oh, maybe.
Maybe you can do it anyway. Because...
Maybe you need to drink the whole bottle tonight.
Maybe it's too much fizz in the position.
Because now, if you take this pawn, you do get the black rook active, hitting the knight and hitting the pawn behind it. And if you take with the knight in this position instead, then
a little bit loose somehow.
This knight is hanging by a thread. These pawns still vulnerable to the black rooks, but maybe it's working just about for Magnus. Eric doesn't really want to give up a pawn.
That's a very concrete line, right? So it does look shaky for white, but it does look like white's surviving, and a pawn is a pawn.
Yeah.
So big question for Eric: can he plug the holes? Can he put that cork back in, or does he have to play this move? In which case, he's lost time.
I think he should just give up the pawn. I mean, get active. Yeah. I mean, this is very much if you retreat the bishop to the b6 square. I mean, you allow the other white rook sitting on f1 to park itself on the open e line, and then the other rook is coming to... Both rooks are going to come to the 7th row, and I don't know, this is like misery central.
I'm not sure. I always thought that black could just shift over the f rook to e8, put the king on f8, and claim no harm done. Try and trade all the rooks off.
Yeah, if all the rooks come off black's bishop, OK, with pawns on both sides of the board, it's doing an OK job. It's doing fine. Potentially.
Potentially. There are still some interesting issues there, but...
OK, he goes.
He does go for it.
The cork is back in the bottle.
But party tonight.
It's come at a high price there. Will Magnus grab this guy?
I think you've got to, because if you allow black now just to play a4 on the next move, rook f8, king to f8, and consolidate,
no problems.
Zero issue. In fact, you start to prefer black because there's a bit of pressure. So he's going active, Ivanka.
Yeah, he had to do. I think he had to do this, and well, Magnus is pushing his pawns on the queen side, and
look at this. The rook's got active.
It has got active, but. the white knight just comes back and is also acting like that cork you mentioned, just keeping all those pawns protected.
Knight defends everything, defends this pawn. OK, also it was this cork was hitting this cork, and one of them had to give way.
I really didn't like Eric's last move.
He played it so quickly, because actually it's not necessarily a huge threat to capture this bishop. For example, if black... OK, there are more productive moves, but here, if black can somehow get one of these pawns off the board, it should just be a draw. Even if white ends up a pawn up in a pure rook endgame, rook endgames have such a drawish tendency. But he ran away with his bishop. Maybe his idea is to just come and attack this pawn. But why didn't you like it, Lawrence?
I'm not sure exactly. I mean, of course, it allows rook d7 immediately.
You've uncorked the bottle, that's why you didn't like it.
And if bishop f6, b3, and rook d2 also exists, of course.
Yeah, OK. You can bully your opponent now, you're a pawn up. The rook drops back. Actually, yeah, it feels like Magnus is consolidating. He's regrouped, holding everything together.
I kind of wish now, you know, we have that ding after every move, that it was the cork out of the bottle sound with every move.
That would get tiring, maybe.
What happens? Because you associate when the cork comes out the bottle, you associate with good times, right? Imagine you've got a miserable position. It's like, congratulations, congratulations. No, this is miserable now for Eric.
And well, he's doing some active things, you know, pushing the h pawn. That's a plan, but the problem is that his rooks, although active, they don't actually have any purpose. I mean, the black rook on the A line has to guard against the advance of the white A pawn. So, well, Magnus is coming forward.
Yeah, it's so instructive what Magnus has done as well with the white king. The white king was on the first rank. It was a terrible piece, but now it's on a really nice square, on a light square. Magnus is going for that light square strategy, right? Just putting everything on the opposite colour from the opponent's bishop. It's also on a light square now, stopping the black rook from attacking those pawns on the third rank. It's just slow and steady. What is Eric's plan? Look at Eric's body language as well, just kind of exhaling. We've all been there, right? When we know we're struggling, we just don't have a plan. And it's kind of a double whammy when your opponent is the greatest endgame player of all time.
It's like the tortoise and the hare, right? This is tortoise chess. Slow and steady wins the race. I must remember it.
It's like a snail, just one square forward. 10 moves later, another square forward.
And the rook moves to the edge of the board. And, well, this is a very exciting position. We see Magnus doing Magnus's things. And whilst Magnus is thinking, just like to share with you a few selfies. First one comes from JMR18, who says that they're watching us from the beer garden in rainy Germany.
Ooh.
Well, still very cool.
Yeah.
Beer garden, so cheers to you. I'm going to salute you with my tea. And the knight retreats again, overprotecting all the pawns. I love this type of chess.
I mean, this is the worst possible thing you could ever wish for against Magnus. This is just, you've got no counterplay. Your dynamism doesn't exist. You are just slowly getting strangled. And Eric knows this. Yeah, Eric is fully aware of what's going on.
You sounded like that Eeyore just then.
Eeyore?
Eeyore, yeah.
From Winnie the Pooh?
From Winnie the Pooh. Oh, no.
Oh,
my position is
that
bad.
what he said? Yeah.
Sorry, Lawrence.
No. It's I take it. He was cuddly and nice, wasn't he, Eeyore? I'll take it.
Yeah.
No, this is horrible. Knight g4 is a great move.
I mean, the evaluation bar shot up. I was wondering whether white could have been greedy and just gone to grab a second pawn. White's rook on the c-file. Could have grabbed that isolated pawn on c7, but Magnus, just keeping control.
And you could just see that sigh from Eric. Yeah. He just knows it's over. Magnus is in his element.
Yeah, for any chess player, this is suffering, but especially when this is your opponent. And OK, the bishop moving makes some sense, but now he gets greedy. And I think he's got enough control, Magnus, that he can get away with this. Any checks on the second rank will be blocked by white's f rook. The rook sitting there near the white king, which we'll see, most likely. I don't think the king wants to go on any journeys into the corner. It just feels unnecessary, so block the check.
Yeah. And he's lined it up so beautifully. I mean, there's no tactics whatsoever in Eric's favour, and he moves his rook.
Tactics against the black king now.
I know.
Oi, oi. Do you see what's happening?
Yeah, we're going to see actually Magnus go on the attack. The black king, when it moves to the... OK, is Eric going to resign? Because if you block this check, it's pretty much the same as resigning, right? You can drop back with the black rook or the black bishop, but if the king goes to the edge of the board, the white knight is going to jump into the centre and start going for the black king. OK, we'll see this on the board.
And, I guess the white knight will jump to the middle, attack the rook, and also threaten the f7 pawn. And the black king is in a mating net.
Yeah, I think we're going to see, just body language-wise, Eric, he's about to resign any moment. And there we go. The black rook was attacked, the black pawn was attacked. Nothing to be done.
Yeah.
He resigns.
It's a win for Magnus Carlsen, striking back after losing in the first round. Now 3 points in this second game against Eric Hansen. It was a great game by the world #1. 41 moves. He took it into the endgame and, of course, won it in the endgame.